Okay, I'm back, and we are going to continue our reading of Henri Bergson. Uh, Bergson's essay, 1912 essay called "The Body and the Soul." And all right, he says, now the glycogen loaded in the muscles is, in fact, a real explosive, and by it, voluntary movement is accomplished. To make and utilize explosives of this kind seems to be the unvarying and essential preoccupation of life. From its first apparition in protoplasmic masses, deformable at will, to its complete expansion in organisms capable of free actions, such as humans. And he says, but I will not dwell further on what, after all, is only a parenthesis. I have dealt with this subject elsewhere. So I come back to what I said at first, that it is impossible to call a thesis scientific which is neither proved nor even suggested by experience. What in fact does experience tell us? Well, it tells us that the life of the soul, or to use a term which does not appear to beg the question, the life of the mind, is bound to the life of the body, that there is solidarity between them, nothing more. But this point has never been contested by anyone. It is a long way from that to maintain that the cerebral is equivalent to the mental, that one might read in the brain whatever is taking place in the corresponding mind. See, a coat is solidary with the nail on which it hangs. It falls if the nail is removed, and it sways if the nail is loosened or shaken. It is torn or pierced if the nail is too pointed. It does not follow from all of this that each detail of the nail, so he's saying that it does not follow from this, from these observations, that each detail of the nail corresponds to a detail in the coat, like the brain and the mind, nor that the nail is equivalent to the coat, and still less that the nail and coat are the same thing. So too, the mind is undeniably attached to the brain, but from this it does not in the least follow that the brain is pictured that in the brain is pictured every detail of the mind, nor that the mind is a function of the brain. All that observation, experience, and consequently science allows us to affirm is the existence of a certain relation between brain and mind, just like there is a certain relation between the nail and the coat on which the coat and the nail on which it hangs. And he says, so what is this relation? Ah, we may indeed challenge philosophy here. Has philosophy ever really given us what we had the right to expect? To philosophy falls the task of studying the life of the soul in all its manifestations. Practiced in, intro, practiced in introspection, the philosopher ought to descend within himself and then, remounting to the surface, follow the gradual movement by which consciousness detends, extends, and prepares to evolve in space. Watching this progressive materialization, marking the steps by which consciousness externalizes itself, at least he would obtain a vague intuition of what the insertion of mind into matter, the relation of body to soul may be. No doubt it would be only a first glimmer, nothing more. But had we only this glimmer, had we only this glimmer, it would enable us to pick our way amongst the innumerable facts with which psychology and pathology deal. And these facts, from psychology and pathology, in their turn, correcting and completing what is incomplete or defective in the internal experience of the philosopher, and would rectify the method of internal observation. So I want to pause here for a moment. I mean, what Bergson is proposing here, what he just said, is that introspection and phenomenological observation, even metaphysical speculation, based on experience and based on observation and based on science, basically, an internal science, would give us some hints about the mind, and then it would allow us to pick through and make sense of all the information and the facts that psychology gives us, which is an external observation. And then the facts that psychology gives us will allow us to then correct our defective methods of introspection. So you have this mutual enlightenment, which is between the external and the internal, between the mind sciences or philosophical introspection, careful introspection, and external observation. They are each correcting and suggesting to each other. The datum of a new science appropriate not just to geometry, what Newton. We'll get to that, but a new kind of science which is about concerns of the mind, which is just now starting to take shape with philosophers such as Sean Gallagher, who wrote a 1997 paper and called phenomenology and the cognitive sciences, and how they could form a relationship of mutual enlightenment in order to better our understanding of the mind. And also he just started a journal called Phenomenology and the Cognitive Sciences, which he's the editor of. So this is finally going on now, but it's taken 90 years or so to get there. So Bergson continues, thus, by an indefinite series of comings and goings between two centers of observation, one situated within and the other without, we should obtain a solution more and more adequate to the problem, never perfect, as the solutions of metaphysicians too often claim to be, but always perfectible, like those of science. The first impulse would, it is true, have come from within. It is in the internal vision that we should have sought the chief enlightenment, and that is why the problem would remain what it must be, a problem of philosophy. But metaphysicians do not readily descend from the heights whereupon they love to dwell. Plato invited philosophers to turn toward the world of ideas, or ideals. Willingly they visit in that society, mixing only with well-dressed concepts, offering them opportunities to meet and intermarry, exerting in that aristocratic circle a refined diplomacy. It goes against them to come into touch with minute facts, especially with such facts as mental maladies, for example. They would be afraid of making their hands dirty. Briefly, the theory which science had the right to demand from philosophy, a theory elastic and flexible, elastic and perfectible, molded on the totality of known facts, philosophy has either not wished or not known how to give. So he's criticizing the traditional metaphysical principles because they didn't get to the concrete particulars. They always dwelt with universals and very general abstract ideas. So naturally enough, then, the scientist has said, quote, since philosophy does not require me, by any facts and arguments, to restrict in any way or confine to any definite points the correspondence between the cerebral and the mental, I shall treat it, provisionally at any rate, as if it were perfect, as if, in fact, between the two there is exact equivalence or even identity. As a physiologist, with the methods at my disposal, merely external methods of observation and experiment, I see only the brain, and can only deal with the brain. I shall therefore proceed as if thought was only a function of the brain. I shall thus be able to advance with more boldness, and have many more chances at making progress. When we do not know the limit of our right, it is well to begin by acting as though there were no limit. There will always be time to draw back. End quote. So that's what the physiologist says, based upon his the methods that he has at his disposal. A certain set of assumptions come along with that, and he treats the mind as if he assumes, says we'll take this theory as far as we can go, and not that it's fact, but that's the way that science works. It treats the equivalence between mind and brain as a fact, a hypothesis.